The Human Federation's galactic fleet floated in the cold silence of space, its ships battered but victorious. Admiral John Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship Eclipse, his face glowing faintly in the dim light of holographic displays. Around him, officers cheered and clapped shoulders, celebrating what they believed was a crushing defeat of the alien coalition. The battle had been fierce. Ships exploded in fiery bursts, debris scattered across the void, and lives were lost. But Earth's forces had prevailed. For now, at least, peace seemed within reach. Lieutenant Emily Ross wasn't joining the celebration. She sat alone at her station near the back of the bridge, her fingers flying over the control panel as she monitored the ship's sensors. Her brow furrowed slightly as she noticed something unusual, a faint energy spike flickering on the edge of their detection range. At first, she thought it might be leftover interference from the battle, or perhaps damage to the sensor array itself. But the readings didn't match any known patterns. It was strange, almost unnatural. "Lieutenant," Captain Daniel Blake's voice broke through her thoughts. He approached her station, his tall frame casting a shadow over her screen. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily hesitated before answering. She didn't want to sound paranoid, not after such a hard-fought victory. Everyone was already on edge. "Sir, I'm picking up an anomaly," she said finally, keeping her tone neutral. "It's faint, but it's there. Something big is out there." Blake frowned and leaned closer to examine the data. His sharp eyes scanned the numbers and graphs for a moment before he straightened up. "Could just be debris from the fight," he suggested. "Or maybe one of our damaged ships drifting off-grid." "I don't think so, sir," Emily replied softly. "This isn't random noise. It's consistent, almost like a signal." She trailed off, unsure how to explain what she was seeing without sounding ridiculous. Signals meant communication, and communication meant someone, or something, was out there. Blake studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll mention it to Admiral Carter," he said. But even as he spoke, he sounded doubtful. The Admiral wasn't exactly known for listening to warnings, especially after a win like this one. Admiral Carter, meanwhile, was busy basking in the glow of his triumph. He raised a glass of synthetic champagne in a toast with his senior staff, laughing loudly as they recounted tales of heroism during the battle. To him, the war was effectively over. The alien coalition was broken, their strongest ships destroyed. What little resistance remained would crumble soon enough. Humanity had proven itself stronger, smarter, better. But deep down, Carter felt a nagging unease. It wasn't just the weight of command or the lives lost. It was something else, something harder to define. Maybe it was the vast emptiness of space, stretching endlessly beyond the viewport, reminding him how small they really were. Or maybe it was the quiet way Lieutenant Ross kept glancing at her screen, her expression unreadable. Still, Carter pushed those thoughts aside. They had won. That was all that mattered. Whatever lay out there in the darkness could wait until tomorrow. For tonight, they would celebrate. And so, the party continued, oblivious to the storm gathering on the horizon. Unbeknownst to them, far beyond the reach of their sensors, massive shapes moved silently through the void. Their hulls gleamed faintly in the starlight, ancient yet impossibly advanced. These were ships from another time, built by humanity's ancestors when Earth still ruled uncontested. Now, they returned, not as allies, but as conquerors. Back on Earth, General Laura Hayes sat in her office at Command Central, staring at a wall of screens displaying data from across the galaxy. Her eyes narrowed as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. Strange signals had been detected in multiple sectors, all moving toward the same area where Admiral Carter's fleet was currently stationed. The patterns were irregular, almost like ripples spreading across water, but they carried a sense of purpose. Something, or someone, was out there. Captain Daniel Blake's voice echoed in her mind. Earlier that day, he'd sent an encrypted message detailing Lieutenant Emily Ross's concerns about unusual sensor readings near the fleet. At first, Hayes dismissed it as post-battle jitters, but now she wasn't so sure. The timing of these signals was too coincidental. She tapped a button on her desk, summoning Major Rachel Collins, one of her most trusted advisors. "Rachel," Hayes began without preamble, "what do you make of this?" She pointed to the blinking dots on the holographic map hovering between them. Each dot represented a signal spike, growing stronger and closer together with every passing hour. Collins studied the map for a moment, her expression grim. "It could be nothing," she said cautiously. "But if I didn't know better, I'd say it looks like coordination." Hayes nodded. That was exactly what she feared. If the enemy coalition had regrouped or called for reinforcements, Carter's fleet would be walking into a trap. Yet something about the signals felt off. They weren't chaotic like typical alien transmissions. They were precise, almost mechanical. Whoever, or whatever, they belonged to, they weren't part of the coalition. Not anymore. "We need to warn Carter," Hayes decided aloud. "Even if it turns out to be nothing, we can't risk losing the fleet." Before Collins could respond, the door slid open, and historian Sarah Bennett entered the room. Bennett rarely ventured outside her archives, but when she did, people listened. Her knowledge of humanity's past was unmatched, and right now, her face was pale with worry. "General," Bennett said urgently, holding up an old digital tablet, "I think you should see this." On the screen was a fragment of text from Earth's early spacefaring days, a prophecy etched into the walls of an abandoned colony ship. It spoke of a time when humanity's children would return to reclaim their birthright, bringing fire and judgment with them. Hayes frowned. "You think this has something to do with those signals?" Bennett hesitated before nodding. "It's possible. The language matches descriptions of ships lost centuries ago during the first exodus, ships we thought were destroyed." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. If Bennett was right, then Earth's long-lost dreadnoughts, massive war machines thought lost to history, might still exist. And if they were heading toward Carter's fleet, "We have to tell him," Collins urged. "If those ships are real, he won't stand a chance." Hayes sighed, rubbing her temples. "And if we're wrong, he'll think we've lost our minds. After today's victory, he's not going to listen to warnings about ghost ships." Despite her doubts, Hayes sent a brief message to Carter, urging caution. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be enough. Pride was a dangerous thing, especially in commanders who believed themselves invincible. And Carter was nothing if not proud. Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, Admiral Carter barely glanced at Hayes's warning before dismissing it. "Signals, anomalies, it's probably just a brace," he muttered to himself, sipping his drink. To him, the battle was over, and anything else was irrelevant. His confidence was contagious, spreading through the crew like wildfire. Morale soared as celebrations continued late into the night. But not everyone shared his optimism. Lieutenant Emily Ross couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every time she checked her sensors, the strange energy readings grew stronger. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. And it wasn't responding to any attempts at communication. Unbeknownst to them all, the truth was far worse than anyone imagined. Deep in the void, Earth's dreadnoughts moved silently, their massive forms blotting out the stars. Their weapons hummed with power, their shields shimmered faintly, and their crews prepared for battle. These ships weren't relics of the past, they were harbingers of a new order. And they had no intention of sharing the galaxy with anyone else. As the hours ticked by, the gap between the dreadnoughts and Carter's fleet shrank. Soon, the silence would break. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. In the cold, silent reaches of space, far beyond the range of Admiral Carter's sensors, Earth's dreadnoughts moved with purpose. Their massive hulls glided effortlessly through the void, their surfaces dark and unmarked, save for faint traces of wear that hinted at centuries of existence. These ships weren't relics. They were weapons, powerful, deadly, and alive in a way that sent shivers down the spines of those who glimpsed them. At the helm of the lead dreadnought, invincible, stood Admiral William Grant. His sharp blue eyes scanned the tactical display before him, a holographic map showing the positions of Carter's fleet. He was calm, almost unnervingly so, as he studied the scattered formation of ships celebrating their supposed victory. To Grant, they looked like children playing at war, unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. "Status report," Grant said, his voice low but commanding. Commander Alex Rivera, his second-in-command, stepped forward. "All systems operational, sir. Weapons online. Shields at full capacity. We're ready to engage on your order." Grant nodded slowly. "Good. Maintain stealth protocols until we're within visual range. I want them to see us before they realize what's coming." Rivera hesitated for a moment. "Sir, do you think they'll surrender without a fight? The signals we intercepted suggest they're not even aware of our presence yet." Grant's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. "Awareness doesn't matter. What matters is dominance. They'll understand soon enough." On board the Eclipse, Lieutenant Emily Ross continued to monitor her sensors, growing more uneasy by the minute. The strange energy readings had grown stronger, closer, and now they dominated her screen. Whatever was out there wasn't just approaching, it was hunting. She tried again to raise Captain Blake, but he was busy overseeing routine maintenance checks, dismissing her concerns with a wave of his hand. "They're probably just comets or stray asteroids," Blake had said earlier, though his tone lacked conviction. "Focus on your duties, Lieutenant." Emily wanted to argue, to insist that something wasn't right, but she knew it would do no good. Instead, she quietly adjusted the sensor array, trying to refine the readings. That's when she saw it, a shadow, massive and unnatural, drifting past one of the outer scout ships. Her breath caught in her throat. "Captain," she called out, louder this time. "You need to see this." Blake hurried over, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm as he stared at the image on her screen. It was unmistakable now, a colossal shape, larger than any ship in Carter's fleet, moving silently toward them. And it wasn't alone. More shadows followed, each one dwarfing the last. "What in the galaxy?" Blake whispered, his voice trembling. Before he could react further, the comms channel crackled to life. A deep, steady voice filled the bridge, cutting through the celebratory chatter like a knife. "Attention, Human Federation Fleet. This is Admiral William Grant of the Terran Reclamation Fleet. Stand down immediately and prepare for integration. Further resistance will result in your destruction." The room fell silent. Officers froze mid-conversation. Drinks paused halfway to their lips as the message repeated itself. Carter stormed onto the bridge, his face red with anger. "Who dares issue orders to my fleet?" he demanded, grabbing the nearest microphone. "Identify yourself." A holoscreen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Grant's stern face. Behind him, the bridge of the Invincible hummed with activity, its crew moving with precision and discipline. "I am Admiral William Grant," he repeated. "And you are trespassing in territory reclaimed by Earth. Withdraw now, or face the consequences." Carter sneered, his pride refusing to let him back down. "You think a few old ships can scare us? We've already defeated the Coalition. You're wasting your time." Grant's gaze hardened, his patience clearly wearing thin. "You misunderstand, Admiral. We are not here to negotiate. This is your only warning." With that, the transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Eclipse in stunned silence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Carter barked orders, snapping everyone back to action. "Raise shields. Arm all weapons. If they want a fight, we'll give them one." But deep down, doubt gnawed at him. The Dreadnoughts were unlike anything he'd ever seen, larger, faster, and bristling with technology far beyond their own. As the first of the massive ships came into view, looming like a mountain against the stars, Carter realized too late that he might have made a terrible mistake. The Dreadnoughts didn't hesitate. A single salvo lit up the darkness, and 3 frigates in the outer perimeter vanished in an instant, consumed by searing beams of energy. Chaos erupted across the fleet as alarms blared and officers scrambled to respond. Panic spread like wildfire across the Human Federation fleet as the true scale of the threat became clear. The Dreadnoughts didn't just outnumber them. They outclassed them in every way imaginable. Each shot from their weapon systems tore through shields and hulls with terrifying ease, leaving behind nothing but debris and drifting escape pods. Admiral Carter's pride faltered for the first time as he watched his ships fall one by one, powerless to stop the onslaught. On the bridge of the Eclipse, Lieutenant Emily Ross clutched her console tightly, her knuckles white. She had seen this coming, but no one had listened. Now, the consequences were unfolding right before her eyes. "We have to retreat," she shouted over the din of alarms and panicked voices. "If we stay here, we're dead." Captain Daniel Blake nodded grimly, his earlier skepticism replaced by stark fear. "Admiral," he said, turning to Carter, "we can't win this fight. Their technology is too advanced. We need to withdraw while we still can." Carter hesitated, his jaw clenched tight. Retreat wasn't part of his vocabulary. It never had been. But even he could see the futility of standing against such overwhelming force. His fleet was crumbling around him, and every second they delayed meant more lives lost. Still, admitting defeat felt like swallowing poison. Before he could respond, another salvo from the Dreadnoughts struck nearby, shaking the Eclipse violently. Lights flickered, and sparks rained down from damaged panels. Officers scrambled to stabilize the ship, shouting orders and warnings as systems failed left and right. "We're losing structural integrity on decks 7 through 10. An engineer yelled. "If we take another hit, we won't survive." Blake finished for him, his voice low and urgent. "Admiral, please, give the order." Finally, Carter relented. "All ships, fall back." He barked into the comms. "Form up at Rally Point Delta and prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." The order came too late for some. Half the fleet was already gone, reduced to floating wreckage or consumed entirely by the Dreadnoughts' relentless assault. Survivors scrambled to follow the retreat, engines flaring as they tried to escape the killing zone. But the Dreadnoughts weren't done yet. Commander Alex Rivera, aboard the Invincible, turned to Admiral Grant. "Sir, they're pulling back. Shall we pursue?" Grant studied the tactical display, his expression unreadable. "No," he said after a moment. "Let them run. They've seen what we're capable of. That's enough for now." Rivera frowned but didn't argue. He knew better than to question Grant's decisions. Instead, he relayed the order to the rest of the fleet, and the Dreadnoughts ceased fire, watching silently as the remnants of the Human Federation fleet limped away. Back on the Eclipse, tension slowly eased as the distance between them and the Dreadnoughts grew. Crew members slumped in exhaustion, their faces pale and streaked with sweat. For many, it was hard to believe they'd survived. Emily Ross exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she typed up a damage report. The ship was battered, but it was still intact. For now. Admiral Carter paced the bridge, his mind racing. How had this happened? Who were these people claiming to represent Earth? And why had they attacked without provocation? None of it made sense. He stopped abruptly and turned to Blake. "Get me General Hayes," he snapped. "I want answers, and I want them now." While Carter stewed in frustration, Emily quietly accessed a secure channel, bypassing standard protocols to send a direct message to the Dreadnoughts. She knew it was risky. If anyone found out, she'd be accused of treason. But she couldn't shake the feeling that communication might be her only chance at survival. "This is Lieutenant Emily Ross of the Eclipse," she began, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "We mean you no harm. Please, let us talk." For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. Just as Emily started to think her message had been ignored, the comms crackled to life again. This time, the voice belonged to Commander Rivera. "Lieutenant Ross," he said, his tone cautious but not hostile. "You're brave to reach out. What do you want?" Emily swallowed hard. "To understand," she replied. "Why are you doing this? We're human, just like you." There was a long pause before Rivera answered. "That's where you're wrong," he said finally. "We're not like you anymore. Not after what Earth has become." His words sent a chill down Emily's spine. Whatever these dreadnoughts were fighting for, it went far beyond simple conquest. And if they didn't find a way to bridge the gap between them, humanity might tear itself apart. As the battered remnants of the Human Federation fleet regrouped at Rally Point Delta, divisions began to surface. The shock of facing Earth's dreadnoughts had shaken everyone, but not all agreed on what to do next. Some officers argued for immediate surrender, while others believed they should fight back, no matter the odds. The tension on the Eclipse was palpable, spreading like cracks in ice. Lieutenant David Ford stood in the middle of the debate. A young officer known for his calm demeanor, he had always been cautious, favoring diplomacy over conflict. Now he stepped forward on the bridge, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We can't keep fighting them," he said firmly. "They're too strong. If we surrender now, maybe we can avoid more bloodshed." Major Rachel Collins, standing nearby, shot him a sharp look. "Surrender? After everything we've sacrificed? No, we have to stand our ground. Running away won't solve anything." Ford shook his head, frustration creeping into his tone. "Standing our ground got us here in the first place. Look around you, half our fleet is gone. Do you really want to lose the rest of us just to prove a point?" The argument escalated quickly, drawing in other crew members. Voices rose, tempers flared, and soon the entire bridge felt like it was on the verge of collapse. Admiral Carter, still reeling from the earlier attack, slammed his fist on the table to silence them. "Enough," he barked. "This isn't helping anyone. We need a plan, not pointless bickering." But even as he spoke, doubt lingered in his eyes. He knew Ford had a point. The dreadnoughts were unstoppable, yet the thought of giving up went against every instinct he had as a leader. Pride and fear warred within him, leaving him paralyzed. Amid the turmoil, Emily Ross quietly worked behind the scenes. Her unauthorized communication with Commander Rivera had opened a fragile line of dialogue, but she knew time was running out. If she didn't act soon, the dreadnoughts might decide to finish what they started. She approached Captain Daniel Blake, pulling him aside to speak privately. "Sir, I think I can broker a truce," she said softly, keeping her voice low so others wouldn't overhear. "Commander Rivera seems willing to listen. If we show them we're not their enemy, maybe we can avoid further conflict." Blake frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "You're risking a lot by doing this, Lieutenant. If Carter finds out—" "I know," Emily interrupted, her expression resolute. "But if we don't try, we'll end up destroying each other. Is that really what we want?" Blake hesitated before nodding slowly. "All right, but be careful. One wrong move, and this could blow up in our faces." Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Admiral Grant reviewed reports from the battle. Though his forces had inflicted heavy losses, he wasn't satisfied. Humanity's fractured state troubled him deeply. The Human Federation fleet represented only one faction among many, each vying for control of Earth's legacy. To reclaim unity, he would need to break these factions completely and rebuild from the ashes. Commander Rivera entered the room, carrying an update on Emily's message. "Sir," the lieutenant from the Eclipse reached out again. "She's asking for terms." Grant raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Terms? What does she propose?" Rivera shrugged. "She hasn't specified yet, but she seems sincere, maybe too sincere." Grant leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "Interesting. Very well. Tell her we'll consider her request, but make it clear that any deal will come on our terms, not hers." As Rivera relayed the message, whispers of hope began to spread among the Federation fleet. Word of Emily's efforts reached Lieutenant Ford, who immediately supported her actions. "If there's even a chance of peace, we have to take it," he told Major Collins. "Fighting isn't the answer. Collins remained skeptical, but didn't argue. Deep down, she knew Ford was right. They couldn't win this fight. Still, the idea of surrendering to the Dreadnoughts left a bitter taste in her mouth. Back on the Eclipse, Emily received Rivera's response and shared it with Blake. While far from promising, it was a start. For the first time since the attack, there was a glimmer of hope. But as Emily looked out at the stars, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battles were yet to come. The Dreadnoughts weren't just weapons. They were symbols of a new order, one that would demand sacrifices from everyone involved. And somewhere in the distance, Admiral Grant watched and waited, his plans unfolding exactly as he'd envisioned. The fragile thread of communication between the Eclipse and the Dreadnoughts grew tighter with each passing hour. Lieutenant Emily Ross worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over the console as she exchanged messages with Commander Alex Rivera aboard the Invincible. The terms were harsh: unconditional surrender, disarmament of all ships, and complete submission to Earth's authority. But it was better than annihilation. Still, not everyone was willing to accept them. Admiral Carter paced the bridge of the Eclipse, his face dark with frustration. He had always been a man of action, someone who trusted brute force over words. Negotiation felt like weakness, a betrayal of everything he stood for. "We can't just roll over and hand ourselves to them," he growled, glaring at Blake and Emily. "They'll crush us the moment we drop our shields." Emily met his gaze steadily, though her heart raced. "Sir, they've already proven they could destroy us if they wanted to. This is our only chance to survive, to find out why they're doing this, and maybe even work together." Carter snorted. "Work together? With those monsters? You really think they'll let us keep any kind of independence?" Blake stepped in, his tone calm but firm. "Admiral, we don't have a choice. If we fight, we lose. If we surrender, there's a chance, however small, that we can rebuild trust. We owe it to the crew to try." For a long moment, Carter said nothing. His pride warred with reason, his instincts screaming that giving up was unacceptable. But deep down, he knew Blake was right. Defiance would only lead to more death. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Fine. Send their terms back. Tell them we agree, but under one condition." Emily frowned. "What condition, sir?" "They meet us halfway. Face-to-face negotiations. No tricks, no ambushes. Just talk." It was a risky demand, but Emily quickly relayed it to Rivera. To her surprise, Admiral Grant agreed without hesitation. "Very well," came Rivera's reply. "We'll send coordinates for a neutral location. Be there within 12 hours, or consider the deal off." 12 hours later, the designated meeting point was a derelict carrier ship called the Phoenix, adrift in the middle of nowhere. Its hull was scarred from years of battles long forgotten, but its life support systems still functioned. Both sides approached cautiously, weapons locked and loaded, ready for betrayal. Emily led the Federation delegation alongside Captain Blake and Major Rachel Collins. They stepped onto the Phoenix's battered deck, flanked by a small security team. Across from them stood Admiral Grant and Commander Rivera, accompanied by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The air crackled with tension as the two groups faced each other. Grant spoke first, his voice cold and steady. "You've chosen to live. Don't waste that chance." Carter clenched his fists but held his tongue. It was Emily who responded, stepping forward slightly. "We're here because we want to understand. Why are you doing this? What do you hope to achieve?" Grant studied her for a moment, his piercing eyes unreadable. "Humanity has strayed too far from its roots. You've splintered into factions, squabbling over scraps while forgetting where you came from. We aim to reunite what was lost and ensure it never happens again." Collins bristled at his words. "By killing us? By forcing us to submit?" Rivera cut in, his tone softer but no less firm. "Sometimes unity requires sacrifice. Painful as it may be, it's necessary." The conversation dragged on, tense and exhausting. Every word felt like walking a tightrope, balancing hope against fear. Slowly, painfully, an agreement began to take shape. The Federation fleet would stand down, handing over command to the Dreadnoughts in exchange for protection and eventual integration into Earth's new order. But distrust lingered. As the meeting ended and both sides returned to their ships, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that peace was still a distant dream. The Dreadnoughts had made their intentions clear. They wouldn't hesitate to enforce their will. And though lives had been spared for now, the cost of submission weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Back aboard the Eclipse, Carter stared out at the stars, his jaw tight. For the first time in his career, he felt powerless. The galaxy had changed forever, and there was no going back. The fragile truce held, for now, but the weight of what had been agreed upon settled heavily on the crew of the Eclipse. Admiral Carter retreated to his quarters, shutting himself off from the rest of the ship. The proud commander who once led with confidence now seemed like a shadow of himself, burdened by the humiliation of surrender. His silence spoke louder than words. He wasn't just angry, he was defeated. On the bridge, Lieutenant Emily Ross sat at her station, staring blankly at the screen in front of her. Though she had played a key role in brokering the agreement, relief eluded her. The Dreadnought's ultimatum still echoed in her mind. Submit or perish. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were trading one form of tyranny for another. What would happen when Earth's new rulers decided their loyalty wasn't enough? Would they turn on them too? Captain Daniel Blake watched Emily closely, noticing the unease etched into her face. "You did everything you could," he said gently, breaking the silence. "No one blames you." Emily glanced up, offering a weak smile. "I know, but that doesn't make it easier. We're handing over control to people we barely understand. What if this was all for nothing?" Blake didn't have an answer. Instead, he turned his attention to the viewport, where the massive shapes of the Dreadnoughts loomed ominously in the distance. Their presence was suffocating, a constant reminder of humanity's vulnerability. For years, the human Federation fleet had prided itself on its strength and independence. Now, they were little more than pawns in someone else's game. Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Admiral William Grant reviewed the terms of the agreement with Commander Alex Rivera. Though outwardly calm, Grant's thoughts churned beneath the surface. He understood the resentment brewing among the Federation fleet. They felt betrayed, humiliated, stripped of their dignity. But he also knew that rebuilding unity required sacrifice. Painful as it might be, humanity needed structure, discipline, and purpose. Chaos had ruled long enough. "They won't trust us," Rivera said bluntly, interrupting Grant's musings. "Not after today." Grant nodded slowly. "Trust isn't given, it's earned. And right now, fear will keep them in line. Over time, they'll see the benefits of our leadership." Rivera frowned, but didn't argue. He trusted Grant's vision, even if he doubted its feasibility. Bringing fractured factions together was no small task, especially when those factions resented being forced into submission. Still, there was no turning back now. The wheels of change were in motion. Back on the Eclipse, tensions simmered below deck. Crew members whispered among themselves, sharing fears and frustrations. Some, like Lieutenant David Ford, believed surrender was the only logical choice. Others, such as Major Rachel Collins, seethed with anger, convinced they should have fought to the bitter end. The divide between them grew wider with each passing hour, threatening to fracture morale beyond repair. Late that night, Emily stood alone in the observation lounge, gazing out at the stars. Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Why had Earth sent these ships? What did they truly want? And how far were they willing to go to achieve their goals? The answers felt impossibly distant, lost somewhere in the vast emptiness of space. As she stared into the void, a faint signal caught her attention, a blip on the edge of the sensor range. At first, she thought it was another anomaly, but something about it felt different. It was faint, almost imperceptible, yet deliberate, like a whisper meant only for her ears. Her heart quickened as she adjusted the sensors, trying to pinpoint its origin. Whatever it wasn't coming from the Dreadnoughts or the Federation fleet. Before she could investigate further, the signal vanished, leaving behind only silence. Emily hesitated, torn between reporting it and keeping it to herself. If she told Captain Blake, he'd likely dismiss it as stress-induced paranoia. Yet ignoring it felt reckless. Something, or someone, was out there, watching, waiting. And whatever it was, it didn't belong to either side. As she returned to her post, uncertainty gnawed at her. The Dreadnoughts had claimed dominance, but the galaxy was vast, full of secrets and dangers yet unknown. For now, humanity's fate rested in the hands of Admiral Grant and his fleet. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the real storm was still gathering on the horizon. The days that followed the agreement were tense and uneasy. The Dreadnoughts loomed over the Federation fleet like silent overseers, their massive forms casting long shadows across the void. Every movement aboard the Eclipse felt heavier, as though the weight of Earth's new rulers pressed down on each crew member. Admiral Carter remained in his quarters, emerging only to issue terse orders or scowl at updates from his officers. His pride had taken a beating, and he wasn't ready to face the reality of their situation. Lieutenant Emily Ross tried to focus on her duties, but her mind kept drifting back to the strange signal she detected. She replayed it in her head, analyzing every detail, searching for meaning. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like a whisper lost in static, but it carried an unmistakable sense of intent. Whoever, or whatever, it belonged to, it wasn't aligned with either side. That much was clear. Captain Daniel Blake noticed her distraction during one of their briefings. "You've been quiet lately," he said, watching her closely. "Something on your mind?" Emily hesitated before answering. She considered telling him about the signal but decided against it. Until she knew more, sharing it might only cause unnecessary panic. Instead, she forced a smile. "Just tired, sir. Haven't slept well since. Well, since everything happened." Blake nodded sympathetically. He didn't push further, though his sharp eyes suggested he suspected there was more to her story. For now, he let it go, turning his attention back to the task at hand, preparing the fleet for integration under the Dreadnought's command. Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Admiral Grant monitored the Federation fleet with careful precision. Though they had surrendered, he didn't trust them. Not yet. Centuries of division and conflict had left humanity fractured, and old habits died hard. Still, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The first step toward reunification was complete. Now came the harder part, enforcing loyalty without crushing hope entirely. Commander Alex Rivera approached him, holding a datapad filled with reports. "Sir, minor unrest among the Federation ships. Nothing major, but morale is low. Some are questioning whether this was worth it." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Of course they're questioning it. They don't see the bigger picture yet, but they will in time." Rivera frowned slightly. "And if they don't? If resistance grows? Then we deal with it," Grant replied firmly. "Unity requires strength. Commander, not everyone will agree, but they'll follow because they have no other choice." As the two men spoke, Major Rachel Collins paced the corridors of the Eclipse, her anger simmering just below the surface. She couldn't accept the surrender, not fully. To her, giving up meant abandoning everything they had fought for. "We should have made a stand," she muttered to Lieutenant David Ford, who trailed behind her. "Even if we lost, at least we have gone down fighting." Ford sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fighting would have meant dying. For nothing. This way we live. Maybe even rebuild." Collins shot him a sharp look. "Rebuild? Under their rule? You really think they'll let us keep our freedom?" Before Ford could answer, alarms blared through the ship. Both officers froze, then sprinted toward the bridge. When they arrived, chaos greeted them. Officers shouted orders, screens flashed warnings, and Emily Ross stood frozen at her station, staring wide-eyed at her console. "What's happening?" Blake demanded, striding into the room. Emily turned to him, her voice trembling. "It's the signal, the one I told you about. It's back, and it's stronger now." On the main screen, a series of coordinates appeared, accompanied by a single line of text: "Come alone." The message wasn't addressed to anyone specific, but Emily knew it was meant for her. Her hands hovered over the controls, unsure what to do next. Before she could act, Admiral Carter emerged from his quarters, his expression grim. "What's going on here?" Blake quickly explained, leaving out Emily's earlier discovery. Carter's jaw tightened as he studied the message. For a moment, he looked like he might dismiss it as nonsense. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "Send a scout ship. Let's find out who, or what, is trying to contact us." Emily's stomach churned. She wanted to volunteer, to take responsibility for uncovering the truth, but fear held her back. Whatever awaited them beyond those coordinates, it wasn't likely to be friendly. As the crew scrambled to prepare the scout ship, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's fragile truce was about to be tested again. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The scout ship, a small and nimble vessel called the Sparrow, detached from the Eclipse and sped toward the coordinates. Lieutenant Emily Ross sat at the helm, her hands gripping the controls tightly. She had volunteered to lead the mission despite her fears, knowing she was the one who first detected the signal. Captain Blake had argued against it, citing the risks, but Admiral Carter overruled him. "If this is a trap," he said coldly, "better you than me." Beside Emily sat Major Rachel Collins, armed and alert, her eyes scanning the darkness outside the viewport. Though skeptical of the mission, Collins refused to let anyone else take point on what could be a potential threat. Rounding out the crew was Lieutenant David Ford, tasked with monitoring communications and running scans. The trio worked in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts as the Sparrow closed in on its destination. When they arrived, the source of the signal revealed itself, a derelict alien craft, drifting silently in the void. Its design was unlike anything they'd seen before. Smooth, organic curves blended seamlessly with jagged metallic edges, giving it an eerie, otherworldly appearance. The ship looked ancient, its surface pitted with scars from battles long past. Yet faint lights flickered within, suggesting it was still operational, or at least partially so. "This doesn't feel right," Collins muttered, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm. "Why would something like this send us a message?" Emily ignored her, focusing instead on the readings coming through her console. "It's not hostile, at least not yet. Power levels are low, almost dormant. Whatever this thing is, it's been out here for a long time." Ford leaned forward, squinting at his screen. "I'm picking up life signs, but they're faint, barely registering." "Could be survivors," Emily suggested. "Or traps. We won't know until we go inside." Collins shot her a sharp look. "You're not seriously thinking of boarding that thing, are you?" "We don't have a choice," Emily replied firmly. "If there's even a chance, this could help us understand what's going on, or give us leverage against the Dreadnoughts. We have to try." After a brief debate, the decision was made. Armed with scanners and weapons, the three officers suited up and prepared to board the alien craft. As they crossed the airlock, the atmosphere inside was thick and oppressive, filled with strange, acrid smells. The walls seemed alive, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent light. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the ship itself was watching them. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the dim interior. Strange symbols lined the corridors, glowing softly in response to their presence. Ford stopped to examine one, his brow furrowing. "This language, it's not familiar, but it feels old, like it predates both human and alien civilizations." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. A low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Lights flared to life, illuminating a massive chamber ahead. In the center stood a figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, its form shifting and indistinct. "Who, or what, are you?" Emily called out, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. The figure didn't answer immediately. When it finally spoke, its voice was neither male nor female, but a haunting blend of tones that resonated directly in their minds. "You seek answers, but are you prepared for the truth?" Collins raised her weapon instinctively, but Emily held up a hand to stop her. "We're prepared," she said, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "Tell us why you contacted us." The figure tilted its head, as if considering her words. Then, without warning, images flooded their minds. Visions of war, destruction, and rebirth. They saw Earth's dreadnoughts rising from the ashes of humanity's first exodus, guided by a single purpose: to reunite their fractured species. But they also saw glimpses of something darker, a force lurking beyond the stars, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When the visions faded, the figure spoke again. "Your divisions weaken you. Unity will save you, or destroy you. Choose wisely." With that, the chamber went dark, and the ship began to power down. The officers stumbled back to the Sparrow, shaken but alive. As they returned to the fleet, they knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and humanity's greatest test was only beginning. Back aboard the Eclipse, the crew gathered in stunned silence as Lieutenant Emily Ross, Major Rachel Collins, and Lieutenant David Ford recounted their encounter with the mysterious alien entity. The visions they described left everyone uneasy. Images of Earth's dreadnoughts rising not just as tools of conquest, but as harbingers of a greater threat looming beyond the stars. No one could explain what the entity truly was or why it had chosen to reveal itself now, but its warning lingered like an unshakable shadow. Admiral Carter listened intently, his usual arrogance replaced by a rare moment of introspection. For once, he didn't dismiss their account as nonsense. Instead, he paced the room, his expression grim. "If what you're saying is true," he said finally, "then we've been fighting the wrong battles all along." Captain Daniel Blake nodded slowly. "The dreadnoughts think they're uniting humanity for our own good. But if there's something out there, a force big enough to threaten us all, then maybe unity isn't such a bad idea after all." Rachel Collins frowned, still skeptical. "Even if that's true, do we really want to trust them? They attacked us without hesitation. How do we know they won't turn on us again?" "It doesn't matter what we want," Emily interjected softly. Her voice carried a quiet determination. "What matters is survival. If the dreadnoughts can protect us from whatever's coming, then we need to work with them, not against them." Her words hung heavy in the air, forcing everyone to confront an uncomfortable truth. Pride and independence wouldn't save them. Humanity's future depended on cooperation, even if it meant swallowing bitter compromises. Meanwhile, aboard the Invincible, Admiral William Grant reviewed intelligence reports detailing the Sparrow's mission. Though initially dismissive of the story, something about the descriptions of the alien craft gnawed at him. He called Commander Alex Rivera to his quarters, where they discussed the implications late into the night. "This changes things," Grant admitted reluctantly. "If there's a larger threat out there, then our focus shifts. Unity becomes more than just ideology. It becomes necessity." Rivera hesitated before replying. "Do you think the Federation fleet will believe us? After everything we've done, they'll see this as another trick." Grant's jaw tightened. "Then we prove them wrong. Actions speak louder than words." Over the next few days, tensions between the dreadnoughts and the Federation fleet began to ease, slightly. Shared purpose replaced mutual distrust. Albeit uneasily, plans were drawn up to prepare defenses against the unknown threat hinted at by the alien entity. Resources were pooled, strategies coordinated, and joint patrols established. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was progress. Emily found herself at the center of these efforts, acting as a liaison between the two sides. Her calm demeanor and willingness to listen earned her respect, even from those who once distrusted her. Slowly, painfully, bridges were built. But beneath the surface, questions remained unanswered. What was the alien entity? Why had it shown them those visions? And most importantly, how much time did they have before the storm arrived? One evening, Emily stood alone in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. Despite the fragile truce and newfound cooperation, she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's greatest challenges lay ahead. The Dreadnoughts had returned to enforce order, but their arrival signaled only the beginning of a much larger reckoning. As the galaxy stretched endlessly before her, Emily whispered to herself, "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the alien craft drifted silently, its mission complete. For now.